Mark lived alone on a quiet human outpost on planet Althera. He wasn't rich, just a skilled engineer, working night shifts to maintain the colony's energy system. His small metal home sat at the edge of the settlement, close to the jungle, where wild alien creatures sometimes wandered in. Life was simple work: eat, sleep, repeat. But after months of eating cold meals and stepping over dirty laundry, he decided it was time to hire help. He opened his dusty terminal and wrote the ad, looking for a housekeeper, part-time meals, and cleaning only human colony base, Sector 9. He didn't expect much, especially since most humans had left Althera years ago. Still, he posted it and went back to work. The next morning, someone knocked at his door. It was early, the sun barely up. And Mark, still half asleep, he opened the door and froze. A tall figure stood there, wearing a gray cloak. She removed her hood slowly, revealing an alien woman unlike any he had ever seen. Her skin was smooth, a soft golden bronze with tiny shimmering scales that reflected light. Her hair was long and braided, dark silver like moonlight. Her eyes were large, glowing softly, and they studied him with quiet focus. "I am Kalia," she said in a calm voice. "You asked for a housekeeper." Mark blinked, not sure if he was still dreaming. You saw my ad?" he asked, confused. "Yes." She nodded. "I accept your offer." Payment not needed, just a place to stay. Mark stepped aside slowly, still stunned. He watched as she entered and looked around with careful steps. Her movements were quiet, graceful, trained. This woman didn't walk like a housekeeper. She moved like a soldier, I thought. Maybe a local human would reply. Mark said carefully. "Not an alien warrior princess or something?" "I am not a princess," Kalia said without smiling. "I clean, I cook, I watch. I protect the home." Mark chuckled nervously. "You don't have to do that. Vacuuming and dinner is enough." But Kalia said nothing, only nodded and moved toward the kitchen. Within the hour, the smell of fresh spiced stew filled the house, and the living area was spotless. Mark sat on his couch, still trying to make sense of it. Why would someone like her, clearly skilled, clearly strong, take a cleaning job? There was something off, but she hadn't done anything wrong. And she had made the best stew he'd ever tasted on Althera. That night, he watched her from his bedroom door as she stood in the hallway, not moving. "Kalia, are you okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I am watching." "Watching what?" "Nothing now, but I stay ready." Mark didn't understand, but he was too tired to argue. He closed the door and went to bed, but part of him stayed alert, wondering who she really was. The next few days passed strangely. Kalia never rested, never sat, never showed signs of weakness. She always cooked early, cleaned fast, and made sure everything in the house was perfect. But she also checked the doors twice, looked out the windows often, and touched her neck when she heard distant noises. One evening, Mark caught a glimpse of her reflection and noticed a faded symbol tattooed under her collarbone. He asked about it, but she simply replied, "It's from another life." Still, she was polite, respectful, and never crossed any line. Mark slowly got used to her presence, though the mystery around her never faded. One night, after a long shift, he returned home exhausted. He looked at Kalia and asked jokingly, "Do you ever smile?" She paused, tilted her head, and said softly, "Only when I know you're safe." That line made something shift in Mark's mind. She wasn't just a housekeeper. She had chosen to be there for him. But why? He decided he would ask her properly tomorrow, but when he woke up the next morning, everything changed. Mark woke up with a strange feeling. His room was quiet, too quiet. The morning light slipped through the small window, but something felt off. He turned his head and gasped. Kalia was standing silently in the corner of the room. completely still, watching him. Her arms were crossed behind her back, her expression blank, her glowing eyes unblinking. Mark sat up fast, his heart pounding. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice cracking from the shock. "I am ensuring your breathing continues through the night," Kalia replied calmly. "I don't need someone to watch me while I sleep," he said, trying to shake off the chill running down his spine. "I understand." She nodded. "But it is my duty." "Duty?" he repeated, confused. "You're a housekeeper, not a guard." She tilted her head slightly. "A home is only clean if its owner is alive." Mark stared at her, unsure if she was serious or joking. But there was no smile, no laugh, just that calm, flat tone again. He got up and walked past her, trying not to let his nerves show. "I think we need to talk about boundaries," he muttered, heading for the kitchen. "I will prepare breakfast," she said softly behind him, already following his steps as she worked in the kitchen, slicing vegetables with perfect precision. Mark sat at the table and watched her carefully. Everything she did was clean, smooth, robotic but graceful. Her hands moved fast, like they'd done this task 1,000 times. "Do you ever sleep?" he asked, watching her closely. "No," she replied, without looking at him. "Why?" "Because I am still hunted," Mark blinked. "What did you say?" Kalia finally looked up, her eyes meeting his. "I do not sleep, because if I do, they may find me." There was silence, thick and strange. "Who are they?" he asked slowly. Kalia turned back to her work, not answering. Mark didn't press her further, but his mind was full of questions. The next few nights, Mark kept waking up at odd hours, and every time Kalia was in the hallway, or sometimes right outside his door, always standing, always watching, never blinking. He tried locking his door once, just to get some peace, but the next morning, he found her standing outside the door anyway, perfectly still, like a statue waiting for a command. One night, he finally had enough. "Look, Kalia, this isn't normal," he said, stepping out into the hallway in his sleepwear. "You're scaring me." "That is not my intention," she said, bowing her head slightly. "Then why do you act like something's about to attack me every minute?" "Because I've seen what happens when I stop watching," she whispered, her voice lower now, almost breaking. Mark paused, surprised. He saw her hands trembling. Just a little. It was the first time he had seen any emotion from her. "What happened?" he asked gently. She looked away. "I failed once, and an entire outpost died because I closed my eyes for 1 hour." Mark didn't know what to say. Kalia stood quietly, her expression now calm again, but her eyes darker, like memories were swimming in them. "I am not here to clean," she finally admitted. "I came here because no one would think to look for me on a human outpost, especially while I am pretending to be this, so why answer my ad?" Mark asked, still trying to understand. She looked directly at him and replied, "Because your file said, alone, isolated, peaceful location." Mark sighed and rubbed his face. "This is insane," he said, sitting down on the floor of the hallway. "I just wanted someone to help me fold laundry." She gave a small nod, "And I have folded it perfectly." He chuckled, despite himself. There was something innocent about her tone, like she didn't quite understand humor or sarcasm. "Kalia," he said, "you can stay, but stop watching me sleep, okay?" She nodded slowly. "I will try." Later that night, Mark lay in bed, trying to sleep again. He kept imagining glowing eyes in the shadows, even though he'd told her not to stand there. But this time, there was no sound, no presence, no cold stare, just silence. He almost felt lonely without her watching. And before he drifted off, he whispered to himself, "Who are you really, Kalia?" Little did he know, the answer would come sooner than he expected, and it would change everything. Mark woke up with pressure on his chest. At first, he thought it was part of a strange dream, maybe one of those half-awake moments. But when he opened his eyes fully, he froze. Kalia was on top of him, her arms braced on either side of his body. Knees on the bed, face only inches from his. Her long silver braid hung beside his cheek, and her glowing eyes locked onto his with laser focus. He couldn't breathe, not from fear but from pure confusion. "Kalia, what the hell are you doing?" he whispered. "Not moving? Stay still," she said sharply. "Do not move." Mark obeyed. But his heart pounded like a hammer in his chest. He couldn't tell if she was about to kiss him, kill him, or both. Her body was tense. Her head tilted like she was listening for something beyond the walls. "There is something in the ceiling vent," she said quietly, her voice low and serious. "I thought it was a predator drone sent to scan for heat." Mark blinked, still trying to process the words and the situation. "You jumped on me because of a noise." "I calculated the angle," she said. "If it fired, your heart would be first to receive damage. My position blocks that." Mark stared at her, stunned. "Wait, you were shielding me?" "Yes." She nodded without blinking. "I was protecting you." Then the vent made a clicking sound again. Kalia's hand shot out toward the drawer beside the bed, opened it, and pulled out a screwdriver. She aimed it like a dagger and threw it in one motion. A loud squeak echoed through the vent, followed by a thud. Mark blinked. Was that a rat? "No," Kalia said, her tone flat. "That was a scout drone with rodent camouflage. It was scanning your room." Mark slowly sat up as Kalia got off the bed and moved toward the vent. She pulled the cover off, reached in, and pulled out a small broken device, half metal, half organic. Its tiny lenses blinked once before dying. She dropped it into a cloth and wrapped it. "Where did that come from?" Mark asked, still in disbelief. "They're getting closer," she whispered, almost to herself. "Too close." Mark rubbed his face, trying to wake up fully. "I thought you were just being paranoid," he muttered. "But this is real, isn't it?" "Yes," she said, without turning around. "They have found me, and now they've found you." He sighed and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her back. "You could have told me sooner. You would not have believed me." She wasn't wrong. Mark stood up, grabbed his robe, and walked to the small kitchen while Kalia followed. He poured himself some water, his hands shaking just a little. "I don't understand why you're here," he said. "You're clearly more than a housekeeper." Kalia stood quietly near the door, her posture still and alert. "I am a guardian," she said finally. "I was trained to protect high-value targets, like royalty." "Yes," she nodded, "but I failed." Mark turned toward her, his eyebrows raised. "What happened?" "There was an attack," she said softly. "My charge was assassinated. I survived, but not by choice." She looked down at her hands. "I was blamed for the failure, marked for death, and hunted ever since." Silence filled the room, heavy and cold. "I ran," she said. "But I needed a place where I could disappear. Your advertisement came at the perfect time. Remote location, no visitors, quiet life." Mark leaned against the counter and let her words sink in. "You could have gone anywhere," he said. "Why protect me now? You are not a threat." She said plainly, "You are?" "Kind." He blinked. "Kind." Kalia nodded. "You gave me a place to sleep, a meal, and didn't ask questions. Most would have turned me in or locked me in a cage." Mark let out a weak laugh. "Well, I might have if I knew you'd be tackling me in bed." She didn't smile. But there was a brief flicker of something in her eyes, a quiet softness. "I had to," she said. "I don't regret it." Suddenly, the light above them flickered, then buzzed. Kalia looked up sharply, eyes narrowing. "That's not a power issue," she whispered. "They've tapped the grid." Mark stared at her. "Wait, you're saying more of those rat drones are out there?" "Yes," she said, pulling a small device from her belt, one he'd never seen before. It blinked red, then yellow. They're moving in. Mark felt fear crawl up his spine. He wasn't a soldier, not a fighter. He fixed things, wires, circuits, machines, not life and death situations. What do we do? He asked, voice shaking. Kalia looked at him, deadly serious. You trust me? She said. And you follow my orders? Mark nodded, slowly. He didn't understand much, but one thing was clear now. Kalia wasn't just here for hiding. She had made a choice to protect him even if it meant dying again. And that made her the most dangerous housekeeper in the galaxy. Mark couldn't sleep after that night, even when the lights were off and the vents silent. He kept hearing the drone's tiny wings buzzing in his ears. He would sit up, expecting to see another creature crawling through the shadows. But every time, he would find Kalia standing near the wall, scanning with her handheld device. He didn't stop her anymore. He didn't ask why she stood there like a statue every night. He just accepted it, because now he knew something or someone was watching. One afternoon, Mark was in the garage, fixing a generator module. He had wires in both hands, sweat on his face, and a half-eaten protein bar stuck to his shirt. Kalia entered silently, holding a toolkit he had left in the hallway. You forgot these? She said, placing the kit beside him. Thanks, he said. Wiping his forehead, she turned to leave, but just as she did, he caught a strange shimmer under her tunic. It was a moment, barely a second, but he saw it, a deep burned mark along her spine, blackened and shaped like a symbol. Kalia, he called softly. Wait, she paused, not turning around. I saw something on your back. She remained silent. Shoulders stiff, that mark, he said gently. What is it? She slowly turned her head, her eyes serious. It is not meant to be seen, she said, not by anyone. But I already saw it, he replied, standing up and walking closer. And it didn't look like a tattoo. She looked down, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. It's a sentence, she whispered, carved by my own kind. Mark froze. A sentence. Yes, she nodded slowly, for failure. He didn't speak, just waited, giving her the space to explain. I once served the House of Virus, she continued, her voice low. It was an ancient family of the Zakari Empire, powerful and cruel. I protected their daughter, the next empress, but she was assassinated during my watch. Mark swallowed hard. And they blamed you? Yes, she said, even though I fought until my body collapsed, even though I tried to stop the explosion with my own armor. Her fingers touched her back gently, like feeling the memory. They didn't kill me. They did worse. They marked me. He stepped closer, gently touching her shoulder. What does the mark mean? She closed her eyes, then whispered the translation. Traitor to the throne. The words hung in the air like a ghost. Mark felt anger bubble in his chest. But you didn't betray anyone. He said, you tried to protect her. In their eyes, failure is betrayal, she replied quietly. There was a long silence between them. Then she opened her cloak and turned around, showing him the full mark. It was brutal lines carved deep, the skin around it healed wrong. The shape looked like a crown cracked in half, with burning lines running down like fire. Mark stared in shock. He had never seen something so painful etched into someone's body. He reached forward without thinking, brushing his fingers near it. Kalia flinched, not from pain, but from surprise. I'm sorry, he said quickly. Pulling his hand back, no, she whispered. It's strange. No one has ever touched it with kindness before. That line stuck in his heart like a needle. Kalia, the warrior, the alien, the protector, had lived with shame and silence for so long. And yet, here she was, protecting him, a human nobody in the middle of nowhere. I don't think you're a traitor, he said firmly. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Kalia looked at him, eyes wide, and for the first time since she arrived. Her lips trembled. She looked like she wanted to speak, but no words came. Suddenly, the power flickered. All the lights blinked red, then turned off. The silence was broken by a low, mechanical hum, distant but approaching. Kalia grabbed her device, her expression turning sharp again. "They're here," she whispered. "The ones who gave me the mark, they've found me." Mark stepped back, fear rising in his chest. But how? The drone, the Ventit, wasn't alone. She grabbed a case from under the floorboard and opened it. Inside was a folded weapon, sleek and alien in design. She assembled it in seconds, the glowing lines along the barrel lighting up blue. "Get in the basement," she ordered. Now Mark hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll stop them. Or I'll buy you time to escape." "No," he said, grabbing her arm, "not this time. You're not alone anymore." Kalia stared at him, confused by his courage. "I don't care what they branded you, you're not a traitor," he said again. "You're my housekeeper," he added with a half smile. "And I think that means we clean up problems together." She blinked, then nodded. "Very well," she said. "Loading the weapon, let's clean." The ground shook slightly. Mark stood near the basement door, frozen, while Kalia moved like a ghost, fast, silent, calculating every sound outside. The lights had gone dark. The walls buzzed from some kind of interference, and something heavy landed just beyond the tree line. A visitor had come, but this one didn't knock. It came from the sky, and it came with weapons, through the window. Mark could barely make out the shape of a dropship, small, black, and smooth like a wasp. Its legs unfolded and pierced into the ground with a deep thunk. Steam hissed around the landing gear, and blue runes flickered across its sides. "They're not here for tea," Mark whispered, his breath shaky. "No," Kalia said, tightening the straps of her armor. "They're here to finish what they started." She handed Mark a small device, round, metal, blinking green. "What's this?" he asked. "A personal shield, limited charge. It'll last you 5 minutes max." He nodded, though he had no idea how to use it. Then he paused. "Why give it to me and not use it yourself?" She looked him straight in the eye. "Because your life is worth more now," she said simply. "They won't stop with me. They'll erase anyone who sheltered me." Mark clenched his fists. "They can try," he said, "but I'm not letting you face this alone." They both turned toward the door as a loud clang echoed through the air. Something had dropped from the ship, something walking now. Its steps heavy, metallic, unnatural. Through the mist, a figure appeared. It was tall, armored from head to toe, with 6 glowing red eyes on its helmet. Its voice crackled through a translator. "Kalia of Virus, surrender now, and your execution will be swift." She stepped forward, weapon aimed, voice calm. "I have surrendered once. I will not do it again, then you die." "Along with the human," the figure replied coldly. Without another word, the armored enemy raised its weapon, some kind of energy lance. Before it could fire, Kalia launched forward, faster than Mark had ever seen her move. She tackled the enemy hard, slamming it into a tree. The lance fired wildly, hitting the sky with a thunderous boom. "Kalia!" Mark shouted as 2 more figures exited the ship. He ducked and activated the shield just in time. A laser bolt bouncing off his chest like a spark. He rolled behind the garden wall, heart racing, trying to remember if he still had that old plasma cutter from his engineering days. Kalia fought like a blur 1 second, using her blade to block. The next, using the enemy's weapon against them. She had taken one down already. The second was retreating behind a boulder, but the third, taller, heavier, approached Mark. The red eyes focused on him like a predator. "You've protected the marked one," the soldier growled. "Now you share her punishment." Mark raised a spanner in defense, completely useless, but he didn't run. Before the enemy could strike, a loud blast cracked through the air. Kalia had fired her stolen lance, hitting the attacker square in the chest. The soldier fell backward in a heap, smoke rising from the burn, Mark stared in shock as Kalia stood between him and the fallen warrior. Her body shook slightly, blood trailing down her side. But she didn't fall. "You okay?" he asked, rushing to her. "I'm functional," she replied, though her voice was weaker. "You're bleeding?" "It's not the important kind," she said, with a small, bitter smile behind them. The ship's engines powered up again. Mark looked up, confused. "Are they retreating?" "No," Kalia said, narrowing her eyes. "They're calling for reinforcements." She stepped forward and pulled a small disc from her belt. "What is that?" "A beacon jammer," she said. "If I place it under their ship, they can't send or receive anything." Mark hesitated. "You mean?" "You're going under the ship," she nodded. "No way," he said, grabbing her wrist. "You're hurt. It has to be done," she said. "If more come, we won't survive." There was a pause. Mark looked at her, then said quietly, "Let me do it." She stared at him, stunned. "You don't even know how it works? I fix things, remember?" He said with a weak grin, "Give me the instructions, and I'll crawl under that death machine." She hesitated, but then placed the device in his palm. "Push this button once you're under the core engine, then run like hell." Mark nodded. Heart racing as he sprinted toward the ship, Kalia limped beside him, ready to cover him. For the first time, the protector had become the one being protected, and the human, once ordinary, now ran with purpose toward the monster from the sky. Mark crawled beneath the enemy ship, the ground cold and wet beneath his hands. His heart pounded so loud he was sure they could hear it. The beacon jammer felt heavy in his hand. Not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. Kalia had trusted him with her last move. And if he failed, they would both die. Above him, the ship's engine hummed with power. Glowing symbols danced across the underbelly. He reached the central core, his hands shaking. He found the right panel, opened it carefully, and pushed the button. A soft green light blinked twice, then faded. The jammer was active. The ship was now cut off. He backed out quickly. Just as one of the last enemies fired toward Kalia, who was limping and out of cover, Mark grabbed a nearby wrench and threw it. It hit the attacker in the helmet, not enough to hurt, but enough to distract. Kalia took the moment and fired the final blast, sending the soldier crashing into the side of the ship. Then everything went quiet. Smoke floated in the air, and for the first time in hours, there were no buzzing drones or flashing lights. Mark rushed to Kalia's side. "You're hurt," he said again, kneeling beside her. She nodded, breathing heavily. "But alive," she whispered. "Thanks to you," they returned to the house, and Mark helped her sit on the couch. He wrapped her arm in cloth and cleaned the gash on her leg. She didn't flinch, just watched him. Silently. "You didn't have to protect me," he said after a while. "You could have run." "I don't run anymore," she replied. "That was the old me." Mark looked at her. "Then who are you now?" Kalia took a deep breath. "I haven't told you the full truth," she said. "Not yet." Mark leaned back, letting her speak. "I wasn't just a royal guard," she began. "I was chosen to protect the air virus, not just serve her. She was my bond sister, chosen through a rite older than the empire itself. Her name was Zana, and she was more than just royalty. She was my only family." Mark's face softened. When the palace was attacked, it wasn't Anne. Outside enemy was her own father. "What?" he gasped. He feared her rise to power. Kalia explained. "Because she believed in change. In peace with humans. In ending the slave markets, in breaking ancient laws. So he arranged for her death and blamed me." Mark felt cold all over. "I survived the blast that killed her. But they branded me before I could even explain. They marked me a traitor, hunted me across systems, forced me into silence. Until I saw your ad," she said with a faint smile. "And something inside me said, maybe this is where I can just exist again." Mark was quiet. Then he asked, "Why did you cook for me?" She blinked, surprised. "You never asked me to, but you did it anyway." Like it meant something, she smiled weakly. "Because you said please," she whispered. "And no one in my world says that to someone like me. You treated me like a person, not a tool." Mark's chest tightened. "You are a person, Kalia," he said, "and you're more human than most humans I've ever met." They sat in silence again, not awkward, but comfortable. The storm outside passed, and the air grew still. Then Mark asked, "What happens now?" "They will send more," she said, "once they realize the ship hasn't responded. But you said their communication is blocked." "For now," she nodded, "but soon." "I must leave." Mark stood, angry and sad. "Leave? You just risked your life for me. How can I let you walk into danger alone?" "Because I've brought it here," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "I brought death to your doorstep." "I don't care," he said, kneeling in front of her. "I'd rather face death with you than go back to life without you." Her eyes widened, lips parting as if to speak, but nothing came. For the first time since they met, Kalia didn't have an answer. Then the terminal beeped, a message flashing on screen. Mark stood and opened it. It was a system-wide warning. "Unauthorized Sakari ship detected. Human colony protocol. Evacuate Sector 9. Immediate relocation required." Mark looked at Kalia. "We can't run forever," he said. "So let's do something no one expects." Kalia raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" Mark smiled. "Let's fight back together." And in that moment, she knew she wasn't just a broken protector hiding in shame anymore. She was standing beside someone who saw worth in her scars. And maybe, just maybe, that made her stronger than ever before. The ground trembled again. A dark shadow passed over the house as a second enemy dropship entered Althera's atmosphere. Mark stood at the window, fists clenched, watching as the ship slowly descended beyond the forest ridge. Kalia stood beside him, armored, focused, and calm, but something had changed in her eyes. She was no longer running, no longer hiding. This time, she was choosing to fight. Mark turned to her. "We have only one weapon. One jammer, and no backup." "I don't need backup," she said simply. "I just need time." "Time for what?" he asked. "To end this," she replied. "Once and for all." She pulled out a silver object from her bag, a device shaped like a seed. Mark tilted his head. "What's that?" "Core trigger?" she answered. "If I get inside their ship, I can overload their fuel cells and destroy the entire craft, destroy the ship." "With you in it?" he asked, his voice rising. "I've done enough running," she said. "This time, I stopped the hunt at the source." Mark stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "I'm not letting you do this," he said. "You can't." "Stop me," Kalia said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's the only way to make sure they never return. There's always another way." Mark said, voice shaking. "I don't want to lose you." She smiled softly. "I was never yours to lose," she whispered. "But I chose to stay, even when I had 100 places to run." Mark grabbed her hand, holding it tight. "Then choose me again," he said. "Stay, survive. We'll figure it out together." Kalia paused, her strong posture trembling for the first time. Her eyes filled with something deep, something raw, like she was fighting between two parts of herself. Then a new sound echoed in the sky, screaming engines. Louder, closer. The ship was landing. They were out of time. Kalia leaned forward and kissed Mark's forehead. "Thank you for reminding me what life feels like," she whispered. "And if I come back, it will be for no one else but you." She turned, stepped into the clearing, and vanished into the Wong. Night. Mark couldn't sit still. He paced the house, his tools scattered, hands shaking. He couldn't just wait for her to die. So he opened the floor panel and dug out something he hadn't touched in months, his prototype signal amplifier. It was unstable, unfinished, but if he connected it to the jammer, he might just disrupt the enemy ship's systems long enough for Kalia to escape. He worked fast, fingers flying, sweat pouring down his back. Outside, the sky flashed with distant, light gunfire, explosions, the storm of battle. Then, silence. Mark ran outside, holding the modified device. Smoke curled from the jungle trees. The second dropship flickered and sparked where it stood half-damaged. Leaning bodies lay. Scattered enemy units, fried circuits, bent armor, and from the haze. She emerged. Kalia stumbled forward, her armor scorched. The trigger device burned out in her hand. She dropped to her knees, exhausted but alive. Mark ran to her, dropped beside her, and held her face gently. "You came back," he said, voice breaking. "I told you." She whispered, "If I survived, it would be for you." He smiled through tears. She reached up and brushed his cheek. "You changed everything," she said. "For a long time, I believed I was just a weapon. But then you gave me a home, a name, a reason to want tomorrow." Days past, the human colony never fully understood what had happened. A forest fire was the official explanation. But those who lived nearby said they saw strange ships and heard voices not of this world. Mark never explained, and Kalia never needed to. They stayed together, pairing what was broken, rebuilding what had been lost. She still cleaned the house, still cooked stew, but now she laughed, she rested, she lived. Sometimes Mark would wake up in the night and find her watching him again, but now she wasn't guarding, she was simply admiring. One evening, while watching the stars, she whispered, "Atai could have chosen 100 paths. Atai chose you." Mark took her hand in his, "And I'd choose you again, even if it meant starting from that strange ad all over." She smiled, her eyes glowing softly in the dark. For the first time in her life, Kalia was not a servant, not a soldier, not a fugitive. She was loved. And she had chosen her place, not out of fear, but out of freedom.